I had a video go viral a couple years ago that was all about gut health, digestion, constipation, gas, bloating, all that stuff that no one really wants to talk about, but we all have questions about from time to time, whether you're vegan or not. And when I made that video, I was newly vegan, and I kind of wanted to share what my experience had been like going from an omnivore diet to a high fiber plant-based vegan diet. And I kind of was just sharing what was working for me at the time. But since then, I've been vegan for many more years. I have a certificate in plant-based nutrition now, and I've just done a lot of living, experimenting, eating all the kinds of foods, and I kind of know a little bit more about what works for my body. I kind of understand nutrition a little bit better, and so a lot of what I said in that video has changed. And I kind of knew that that video needed to be updated, but I figured, why make another anecdotal video just based on my experience? So instead, I had two of my friends who are not only gut health experts, but they are also plant-based Registered Dietitian Nutritionists. That's always hard for me to say for some reason. And I asked them, will you please come on my YouTube channel? Will you react to this video that went viral, that I know that I said a bunch of stuff and I don't know if I said what I said was right, and I kind of just want to like bust all the myths and clarify and share actual factual evidence-based information with people. And will you come and do that? Will you come help me? And they said yes. And so we were in San Diego a couple months ago. They watched the video. I was cringing the whole time because it's really hard for me to watch videos of myself. I don't know, it just feels weird. And so I was sitting like this the whole time, but it was so helpful because they really did share so much information. So if you've ever struggled with bloating, gas, constipation, anything like that, if you're a shift worker and you work nights and your circadian rhythm is a bit off and you eat at wonky hours because you're eating on your lunch break like I used to, that is all covered in this video as well. If you've ever heard of lectins or oxalates, or there's like FODMAPs that you're worried about, they cover that in this video too. So literally from start to finish, they share so much useful information. I wish this video had been out back in 2017 when I made the original video, because I personally would have benefited so much, but I'm really happy to be sharing it with you today. I hope that you find it helpful. Give this video a thumbs up if you're excited, and let's go ahead and get started. So I brought in some experts. Over here we have Dahlia. She is a registered dietitian and she is a gut health expert. So she is going to help kind of anything that I said that was just totally wrong, we're going to learn together. And then Grace, also registered dietitian, and they are some of the most helpful people that you can follow on Instagram, on YouTube. I will link their accounts below, but thank you guys for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to review this.
I'm nervous.
Not only from a nutrition perspective, but like I want to troll you as a friend, and I'm very amped to do so.
Background story, at this time I was cocktail waitressing at night, so I had really weird hours. I'd been vegan for about 1.5 years or 2 years, and I really didn't understand the way that my lifestyle was affecting my health overall. So I'm sure I said a lot of things that you guys are going to be like, oh.
Yeah. I love how you brought that up though, because with nutrition and with food and gut issues, so many people focus on the food. They think what I eat today is the reason why I have these symptoms.
Right.
Girl, no. Like your stress plays into it, your hormones play into it, your motility plays into it, your balance of...
What is motility?
Yes, motility is the rate at which food moves through your digestive tract. So all of us have different motility rates based on different things, and the balance of inflammatory, anti-inflammatory microbes. So there's so much that could have happened literally the day you were born that can influence your gut health today. So I'm so excited to get into this.
So some people are kind of surprised to find out that even though I'm vegan, I don't really eat a ton of raw fruits and vegetables. And that's because my body personally doesn't respond well to them. So for example, I can't really eat raw apples, raw carrots, raw broccoli, raw kale. Really, any of that stuff isn't great for my digestion. It almost immediately causes bloating.
Ooh, this is big, you guys. So like I was mentioning before, I think the emphasis is always so heavily on what to cut, what food am I eating here and now that's bothering me. Certainly raw food can be more cumbersome to digest because there's just more that needs to go into your digestion with raw food as opposed to something that's cooked, pre-frozen, blended, or a mix of those, because you're basically mechanically digesting that food, if you will. You're breaking down the fiber for your body. So yes, and also interesting that people so heavily focus on what they have to cut out rather than maybe what can I feed my healthy microbes in my gut to ensure that they're happy. We're getting that increase of healthy, beneficial microbes while we're trying to balance out maybe more of the inflammatory microbes that have been living there.
Yeah. So my go-to was to cut it out, and then you're saying before you cut anything out, what can you add?
Yeah.
I love that. Raw broccoli, raw kale. Really, any of that stuff isn't great for my digestion. It almost immediately causes bloating, and I sometimes have a hard time with constipation if I eat those kinds of foods.
So many who are constipated despite eating fiber might have a higher abundance of methane and methane producing microbes in their gut. So we have bacteria, we have fungus, we have viruses, we have archaea, and we have these archaea who produce methane.
Okay.
And they can cause a little bit of constipation. Interestingly enough, there were several great studies that showed that those who consumed high amounts of dairy in the beginning of their lives have more methane producers residing in their guts. They have more abundance of that archaea. So again, what you eat today is not necessarily influencing your symptoms today.
Okay.
We know also in studies the first 1,000 days of life are most influential to your keystone species. So again, if depending on how mom was eating during pregnancy and her health, depending on how you were eating in your first couple of years of life, your steroid use, your antibiotics, so many things, your exposures in the environment, your oral health, so much factors into those keystone species that are very well going to follow you the rest of your life.
And as a pregnant mom, I'm thinking about that a lot because my baby is head down right now, which means I have the option to do a vaginal delivery, which is so much better because you get inoculated with that bacterial flora of your mother, as opposed to if you're C-section, oftentimes, you know, a lot of doctors won't do anything and you'll be getting whatever the first colony of bacteria is whatever's on those rubber gloves. So I know in a lot of like more modern facilities, they're like actually swabbing. It sounds gross, but they're swabbing like the mother's
vaginal microbiome.
Exactly, and putting it on the baby's face. So it's a whole like holistic thing. Also, thinking about how much younger you are in this, like it could have been alcohol content, right? It could have been,
I was definitely drinking more back then.
right? Antibiotic use, or for a lot of women, like chronic birth control use, that can affect your gut health as well.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because during this time I was cocktail waitressing, and so I was doing a lot of shift work. My circadian rhythm was really off, and one thing I don't think I really talked about in this video, I don't remember, is that my sleep was off and I wasn't prioritizing sleep. I read a really great book by Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep, and it totally changed how much I prioritize sleep nowadays, and I have noticed that there's a connection. For me, I don't know if I'd love to ask you guys about it, but I feel like when I sleep regularly and consistently, I don't have the same type of gut problems that I had before. But at this point, this was like me eating raw foods on my lunch break at work. I was stressed because I have all these tables, and then I had a quick 30 minutes and I would try to eat a kale salad fast, and then I would go and work for another 4 or 5 hours, and then I wasn't sleeping when I got home. So I think I was like, oh, it's the raw kale.
Well, they also do studies on, because this is so gross, you guys. You can actually analyze gas, like farts, and see where that gas came from, and they find that majority of the gas that comes out of people in that way is actually from swallowed while they're eating, like quick eating, minimal chewing. That's the majority of our gas.
Weird. So multifactorial. And you mentioned you would work late nights, so you were eating outside of your regular circadian rhythm. That certainly can play into gut health. Like you were mentioning, you were stressed, you weren't sleeping well. All of those factors can impact your gut and how you're going to feel after a meal, because maybe you went out to lunch with a friend, you're enjoying time with Grace, and you ate that same exact kale salad. You might have felt differently after it then.
Right.
As opposed to when you're eating that on your lunch break.
So what can someone do if they have a quick lunch break and they are also kind of scarfing down, or if they're shift workers and they eat at weird hours? What can they do to improve their digestion?
I try to recommend keeping it simple, especially if you have a quick lunch break. So again, like I mentioned, maybe having pre-digested fiber. So having a smoothie might digest a lot better than a big salad. So it's still raw.
I'm having to stop shaking my head because I'm like so fascinated. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'll listen. A smoothie, yes.
Maybe it's cooked food. You want to, again, try to eat as closely to your circadian rhythm. So perhaps if you're starting your shift at 8 p.m., maybe you ate dinner before, and then on your lunch break, you're having a nice herbal tea, you're having some sparkling water. If you don't feel hungry at that time, just because it's called a lunch break. And if you've already eaten the rest of the day, your other meals, you don't necessarily need to eat at that time. Try to prioritize your sleep and get it back on track and back in rhythm as quickly as possible on your days off. Try to recover.
And you think that makes a difference?
That makes such a difference.
Interesting.
I would say in line with that, eat to your circadian rhythm. So front load your calories. We know that individuals have better metabolic health when they're eating more calories earlier in the day. So if you're not awake, that's one thing, but if you are awake and that is an option, always best to front load your calories, have a bigger breakfast and lunch than dinner, and that will always help digestion. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was soluble fiber. So there are two kinds of fiber, and a lot of the general public kind of thinks of fiber is fiber, but soluble fiber is the more comforting fiber. It's the fiber in things like oatmeal where it gels in our system and helps kind of slow gut motility. So that can be a more gentle source of fiber if you're looking to, stay more regular and just avoid some upset in digestion.
You can still eat all those wonderful fruits and vegetables. You just don't necessarily have to eat them raw, because even though they are at their peak, highest nutrients when they're raw, right? I've heard that that's not true.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a bunch of raw vegans come after you for saying
I don't remember. I don't really think so. But I feel like I've learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I've read that when you cook a food like spinach, it's actually, there's a different bioavailability and they're both nutritious.
Love that you use
because
that term.
I think there was something going around back in like the 90s or something where it was like if you cooked food, then you cooked all the vegetables out. Right. That's not true?
That was a big rumor, and actually the nuanced part about it is that every food is different. So certain foods, tomatoes, like the lycopene in tomatoes, that anti-cancer compound, that actually increases when it's cooked. So tomato sauce and tomato purees and things like that would be more beneficial than a raw tomato if we're thinking about like disease prevention and antioxidant content.
Vitamin A, beta carotene, a lot of times vitamin E.
Absolutely. And then cooking also impacts anti-nutrients. So when we think about like phytates and oxalates and things like that, soaking and cooking things like beans and greens, everything like that, they actually become more bioavailable in terms of the iron and zinc content. So in a way, cooked foods are oftentimes healthier, but there's a lot of individual variability there in terms of what food you're actually talking about and what you're doing to it.
Well, and that goes back to the microbiome, because some of these anti-nutrients,
It's a tough word.
It chills me to my bones. That really depends on, again, your microbes living within your gut, like oxalates, right? We hear a lot. I kind of secretly joined these ex-vegan groups because I want to see why people stopped being vegan. I'm very curious about it. And oxalates get brought up a lot.
That's so fun.
Really often.
That's awesome.
We actually have in our gut bacteria and other microbes that break down oxalates. So bifidobacterium, lactobacillus, oxalobacteria, they're supposed to break down those oxalates for you.
That is so comforting to know, because that's something that's caused a lot of fear. Like when you read it, you're like, I feel like this maybe is not true, but at the same time now I'm a little bit paranoid,
Totally, absolutely. So again, those species in your gut, maybe when you were struggling with oxalates, maybe they weren't as robust as you wanted them to be. Maybe if those foods were not making you feel as great. So it really does go back to your gut health. I'm just so obsessed with gut health. So
I'm so glad you guys are here. I've already learned so much. Another thing that also surprises people is I've drastically decreased my leafy green consumption. I know. Hold on. Just let me explain. If you guys have watched my What I Eat Today videos, you know that when I work, which is 4 to 6 days a week, I have to pack a lunch and also sometimes a dinner. And so what I was doing most days was I was making like a big salad with some kind of starch, potatoes, grains, whatever, beans, and other veggies. Basically making bootables, but like most of them were mixed greens. So I was putting like 2, sometimes 3 cups of mixed greens in these big Tupperwares with my salads, and I was having that twice a day, which means I was eating anywhere from like 3 to 6 cups of mixed greens a day, which means I was eating anywhere from like 3 to 6 cups. And I just found that was too much for my body. I think it's better to eat a variety of fruits and vegetables instead of just all one thing, especially leafy greens, because they require a lot of water to digest. And if you eat a ton of them, my mom kind of described it as like I was almost creating like a haystack in my intestines, because it was just like nothing was passing through, and I was having such a hard time with constipation, and I couldn't figure it out because I was like, I'm eating fruits and vegetables, why am I feeling bloated? This is the part that I knew I was gonna say, and that I feel like I'm cringing about, because like the whole idea of like your sort of intestines being a train track that can be blocked by a haystack, I'm just kind of like, I feel like that's
There's actually a thing called is it called a Bezoar?
Yeah.
There's like actually masses that can form in people's intestines when they eat things like sunflower seeds and they don't know that they're supposed to take the shell off. So that's like a dramatic example.
Dr. Greger's thing.
Yes, but it's essentially like a ball of fibrous mass that gets lodged in your intestines, and it can cause a lot of problems.
How do you get
Bowel
that? What
obstructions.
happens?
Well, it depends on your motility, your gut health. Your body sometimes can break them down, but sometimes they will cause a small bowel obstruction. So you might need a nasogastric tube to kind of just give your bowels a little bit of rest, and they might need to alleviate the Bezoar or the bowel obstruction.
We can insert the
in different ways.
nasogastric tube today if you'd like.
Right.
So sometimes it's just prokinetic medication.
She just has it at her house.
Right. No, we keep one on file. Yeah, we got that.
In 2018, there was actually a really incredible study that came out of the University of San Diego, very close to where we are, and they actually showed between patient stool samples, or they called them citizen scientists. So people submitted these samples from all around the entire world. And they submitted stool samples as well as food diaries, and they correlated that those who consumed the widest variety of plant foods, over 30 types of plants between fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, grains, legumes, herbs, and spices, had the most wide variety in their gut microbiome. Again, we need more follow-up data on this and more robust studies on this, but that was a pretty good indicator. And subsequent studies have also echoed this, that eating a variety of not only plant foods, but types of fiber. So that soluble, almost mop type of fiber. What I like to tell my patients is, think of fiber as cleaning tools. If you really want to clean the floor very well, yes, you want that insoluble fiber broom type. So it kind of sweeps things through and kind of encourages things along, but you do want to mop, or else you'll have leftover spots behind. And so it's important to have both, and starchy foods can be very gut-friendly foods. They might have things like resistant starch in them, and then you have insoluble fiber, and those are fermented by your healthy microbes in your gut.
So a hard and fast rule, if you guys are looking for the difference between soluble and insoluble fiber is what adds bulk to your stool. Again, this whole topic is gross, so I'm sorry for
I love
all
it.
the poop references.
I love talking about poop.
Right, but insoluble fiber is what adds bulk to our stool, giving it like the, I'm gonna stop there. Soluble fiber is what slows gut motility. So they're both beneficial, they're both very needed, and
both can help a beautiful poop. Soluble fiber is needed too. You want that type 4 long snake. They both matter for that beautiful, easily pleasurable, like Dr. Will Bulsiewicz from Fiberfield says, you want your poop to feel good. If you're straining, if you're running and you're like, guys, I need to get out of here, you want to really look into what's going on with your.
And listen, I love those things. I am so happy that they exist, because I can get anything that I want to have in a vegan version, and I don't have to hurt animals, and I don't have to put horrible things into my body, and that makes me so happy. I just find that they're generally a lot higher in salt and also fat than I generally eat. I like to eat like a whole food, plant-based diet, like food in its whole form, and that is what makes my body feel the best and what helps my digestion and gives me the least amount of bloating. So I find that when I eat a lot of fake meats, that I do have a lot more bloating.
I like that, and I was just going to say that could be twofold. Like, you kind of allude to it as if it's the deficit of fiber that is problematic in those foods. And not only that, and I don't want to say problematic as if they're not okay, but just to be an educated consumer and consume them, like you're saying, in moderation or on occasion. It can also be the processed ingredients in those foods. So for some people, gluten can be like a gut irritant, and that might be causing some constipation or diarrhea. So it could be more playing into it than just the lack of being a whole foods or the lack of fiber. It could be an ingredient that doesn't sit well, that's just more highly processed.
And
that's good to know.
Outside of gluten, the other thing that I think a lot of people don't know about, a lot of these plant-based burgers and fake meats, especially the burgers, I will kind of focus on those, they're really high in saturated fat. So they oftentimes are made with coconut oil or palm oil, and of course that creates that texture and consistency, but studies have shown that saturated fat not only affects cardiovascular health, but saturated fat induces leaky gut after your meal. So if you are then consuming these high saturated fat foods, you are then having these food proteins kind of leak out into your bloodstream, out of your gut, because they're inducing that more intestinal hyperpermeability. That also can cause GI distress.
I love that. That's a golden nugget for sure.
So the other thing with what you were mentioning of holding it in, this happens a lot with my patients where If they have IBS, if they have IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, or irritable bowel syndrome, they're very acclimated and accustomed to clenching so that gas doesn't fall out, or gas doesn't kind of pop out. And bowel movements, they're always kind of holding it in, especially if it's IBS-D or Crohn's or colitis.
That's so sad.
It is. And so we have muscles, right? We have muscles in and around our rectum. We have something called our pelvic floor muscles, and they can become acclimated to clenching. So anytime my patients tell me, yes, I have these dry, hard balls, these rabbit pellet poops, I'm always thinking pelvic floor, because what can happen is that stool has been sitting in the colon for so long that their body has reabsorbed water from it, so it's dry and hard. And then the little rabbit pellet poops come from pelvic floor muscles being overly trained, so they're overly strong, and then when you feel like you need to go, you feel like a bowel movement's coming on, you're sitting there on the toilet, and maybe they relax for a second, so they kind of pop off a little ball, and then they clench back up once again.
How do you relax
There's pelvic floor therapy. So there are physical therapists who are specially trained in pelvic floor therapy, and they can help you reteach your muscles and retrain your muscles to relax.
This is graphic and informative.
And I have replaced my mixed greens. Like, I'll have a little bit of mixed greens, but now I'll do something that has a little bit more water, like romaine. I love romaine, and I find that all fruits and vegetables that have a high water content are a lot easier for me to digest. So if I'm gonna eat raw veggies, I tend to stick to the ones that have a high water content, and that makes my body feel really good.
The thing about how I couldn't eat raw vegetables, but like now I have raw apples and raw kale all the time. I wanted to ask you guys, because I couldn't, I don't know if I couldn't back then, but I felt like if I ate those foods then, that it was hard for me, but now I eat them and I feel fine. So why does that happen?
So it seems like you've had a shift in the balance of your microbes over the years. It's funny because some of the raw things that you had pictured, I saw in your videos that you were eating, are low FODMAP. So FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. They're basically fermentable fibers and sugars that are found in foods, fermentable carbohydrates.
Okay.
So you were finding that not only does romaine lettuce have more water, which you were associating with less bloat, it also has less fermentable carbohydrate in it. So same with tomatoes, same with cucumbers, to a certain degree, same with grapes. So you were naturally gravitating towards some of those lower FODMAP foods. Fermentation is not necessarily a bad thing. We know when we ferment in the colon, in our large intestine, that last leg of our digestive tract, there are actually a lot of benefits. Yes, we pass gas, and hopefully it's not in excess of the normal 15 to 20 times per day. But we also produce a beneficial byproduct of that fermentation called short-chain fatty acids. These can very well repair the lining of your intestines. So if you are someone living with intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut, it can help kind of meld things back together. So the fermentation is not bad, but if it's in excess where you're finding this change in your bowel habits, when the gas and bloating is extremely painful, disruptive to your day, or if you're having a lot of upper bloat, you might want to look with your care team, your gastroenterologist, your dietitian, if you have one, into assessing for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where some of those microbes that should be living in the colon creep up to your small intestine, and they're doing the right thing in the wrong place.
Right.
They're not bad.
That's SIBO, right?
That's SIBO or IMO or SIFO, it can be. So it could be bacterial overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, archaea overgrowth, and methanogenic overgrowth. So if that's the case and you're finding that as you eat and drink, you're more and more bloated throughout the day, you definitely want to be assessed for SIBO. It might not resolve on its own. You might need intervention.
But I love that you mentioned, too, that when you eat a meal, your stomach is naturally going to extend. I think sometimes we forget about that in a society and in a culture where we go on Instagram and everyone has a flat stomach and all their pictures. When we eat food, we are taking that food from a plate into us, into our stomach. So we should naturally have a distended stomach for some period of time. Again, I love that you just pointed out it's only problematic if it's causing a lot of discomfort and it's kind of a more chronic ongoing issue.
And I feel like I put FODMAPs in an unhealthy light right now, but FODMAPs are some of the most nutrient-dense foods we have on this earth. So apples are highly fermentable. We know that cruciferous vegetables like kale, broccoli, and cabbage can be more fermentable. This is not a bad thing. Again, you want to train your gut. Just like you wouldn't go to the gym and try to bench press 400 pounds when you haven't been training for that. Your gut is very much the same. So you might want to trial and work with a care team to temporarily, no more than 8 weeks, trial a low FODMAP diet, then work with reintroductions, see which ones you're reacting to, and go from there so you're not eliminating foods for a prolonged period of time. You want to keep in as much diversity as possible.
Well, that's why I'm so glad that you guys are here, because it can be confusing. You hear that kale is healthy because it's cruciferous, and that can be anti-carcinogenic, right? Or right? Yeah, right. But then at the same time, then you're like, oh, but it could be FODMAPs. So then you're like, I'm confused. Which one is right? And so that's why it's so important. Like you said, don't get all of your information from Instagram or from YouTube. Always check with someone like a registered dietitian to work with them and like with your doctors, because they will be able to give you the real help that you're looking for, that you're not going to get from social media.
And always remember that health is person and context specific. So FODMAPs for some might be causing issues in that acute time frame of 8 weeks. They might need to rule them out. But for most people, those are really healthy foods that we should not be eliminating. Yeah. We heart FODMAPs.
Yes.
That's such good advice. Yeah. And our bodies change so much over time too. So yeah.
And so does your microbiome.
Absolutely.
You guys, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you.
I was really nervous.
I was really wanting to troll you, but that was a high quality video. Like, I felt like you pitched it to us as like, oh, I don't know why it went viral, probably because I said so many silly things, and it was like really on point. I loved it.
Your look was so posh. I felt like I was watching a celebrity say these things.
I feel the same way. I love the platinum blonde,
and I love this look.
Thank you.
And we love you.
I've been sweating for a straight 20 minutes.
Me too.
So I cannot wait for this.
I don't think maybe it's you're pregnant and I'm pregnant and you're nervous, but like I'm also sweating. I'm surprised she's pregnant.
So I'm going to put all of their information in the description box below. We three just got done filming a taste test video over on Grace's channel. So if you have questions about protein bars, vegan protein bars, you're going to want to check it out.
And it might not be up yet, you guys, because I might have given birth and I might need a few more minutes to edit, but it will be up real soon.
Yeah, subscribe anyway, because both of them make really great content that, as you can see, they're super helpful.
Likewise.
Thanks, girl. This is fun.
If you have any questions for me, Grace, or Dahlia, you can leave them in the comments below. And you will also find Grace and Dahlia's YouTube channels and Instagram accounts linked in the description box, so make sure you check that out. Feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, because that really helps out my channel, and I will see you in a video very soon. Bye, everyone.